Hi everyone, welcome back. Another drawing demonstration for you today. As you can see, I'm scraping some graphite powder from an HB woodless pencil. I'm just blending it in with a piece of kitchen towel to get some nice soft misty background effects. I've drawn in a couple of trees to start with, just to give me an idea of where I want the lights and darks to be with the graphite powder. Trouble is with doing that though, you will sort of blend them in and lose them a little bit. As you can see, the tree on the right hand side there, I've kind of lost it, but I can still see just some faint pencil marks there, so I'll be able to put that back in a little while. It's going to be sort of a misty forest type scene. It's going to have some like sunbeams and things like that shining through the trees. I'm using the kneadable eraser now just to pull out some highlights, gaps in the trees and things like that where I want the sun to come shining through. I'm scrunching the kneadable eraser up at the end to make it into a nice fine point to get some finer detail. As you can see, I've put a boat in the foreground, but I decided to change that at the end. I actually finished the drawing with the boat in it and everything, and then decided I didn't like it at all, so I completely erased the boat and the figure, and I decided to put two backpackers walking along the path instead. It just made for a nicer composition. I just preferred the look of it a lot better. I think with the boat being there in the foreground, it kind of stops the eye from travelling over onto the path and following the path along to the focal point. So yeah, I decided just to get rid of it. As you can see now, I've just put some rays of light coming through tree canopies there. I'm just using the kneadable eraser. Be very careful when you do this. Don't press down too hard, or you'll erase all of the graphite and you'll get through to the white paper, and that will just be too harsh. But if you do that, you can blend it a little bit with a blending stump, and it should be okay. But the best way of doing that to achieve those rays of light is to just press very gently. Just literally hold the kneadable eraser on the paper and just move it across. Don't push it across, just gently move it across, and you'll just remove the top layer of graphite, and you'll still leave some of the graphite powder in the grain of the paper, and you'll get a nice soft effect. So I'm just working on a little bit of foliage there with a 2H pencil, trying to keep it nice and soft and nice and light. It's going to be in the distance, so I don't want it to be too detailed. So I'll just draw it in first, and I'll soften it a little bit with the blending stump. Just using a little bit of kitchen towel there just to soften off around the base of the foliage there. Now I'm using the Derwent pencil eraser, just touching it on the graphite, and it just lifts it off, gives nice little spots, little flecks and highlights and things like that. And now for the trees that are further forward in the picture, I'm using an HB pencil, pressing just a little bit harder, just to achieve a little bit more detail, so I get a better contrast between the foreground and the background. Those rays of sun coming through the tree canopies, they look quite overdone at the minute. They don't look very subtle at all, but they will be drawn over with more foliage later on in the picture, which should sort of take your eye off them a bit, but I still want them to show through just a little bit, just to create that nice sort of sunlit forest effect. I mean, the main part of the light source is in between the two trees there, and that's where I want most of those sun rays to be. But just a little bit in the background will look nice just at the back of the foliage there. it'll add a bit of space between the foreground trees and the distant trees in the background. And again, I'm using an HB pencil for this middle tree, just to do the foliage there. Try and keep it dark across the top edge again, so it will stand out against the tree at the back of it. I don't want the foliage to all get sort of lost and all merged together. You actually want to see the definition between the two trees. I'm using a 2H pencil just to lightly draw in some distant tree trunks, and then I'll go in and soften them with a blending stump. Again, I don't want them to stand out too much, because they are set at the back of these foreground trees. So I keep them just a little bit lighter and a little bit softer, and it should look okay. Just working a little bit on the foreground now. You'll probably notice that I jump around on a picture. I don't kind of stick to one area like a background and completely finish it and then work on the foreground. I don't seem to work conventionally in that way at all. The reason is I'm kind of judging the relationship between the elements of the picture as I'm drawing it. And what I mean by that is, when I'm drawing the foreground, I'm looking at the background as I'm drawing it. I'm thinking, is this, what effect is this having on the background? Is it making the foreground stand out too much and the background drop further back, and vice versa? When I'm drawing the background, I'm sort of looking at the foreground, thinking, is this clashing with the foreground? Am I bringing the background too far forward? And sometimes I am, and that's why I jump from one to the other, because I go from one to the other to correct it. Like now, I'm drawing in some tree trunks there, just behind the sun rays, and I've just jumped from the foreground to doing that because I thought the foreground was looking too much, and it needed a little bit more in the background, because the background just looked too lost with such a strong contrast in the foreground. So that's why I keep going from one to the other and jumping around the picture a little bit. I mean, it's okay if you want to work in a more conventional way, by drawing the background in first and then drawing the foreground, or if you want to work in little sections, and work your way along the picture, that's fine. It's probably safer to do that. This is just the way I do things. We're all different, so you find your own way, your own methods. So you do what you get your best results with. This foreground tree, I'm adding a little bit more detail, a little bit more texture on the trunk. More bark, a little bit more shadow on there. So we get a nice sort of receding effect as it goes off into the depth of the forest. I only actually used 2 grades of pencil for the whole of the background, and pretty much most of the foreground actually, and that was just a 2H and an HB. I did actually use a 2B pencil when I put the figure in with the boat, but apart from that the majority of it is just a 2H and an HB. And obviously varying pressure to get the various degrees of tone there. And again, I'm just using the HB pencil to draw in the foliage on the foreground tree. But I'm leaving bigger gaps and bigger sky holes and things like that. more detail, more defined, because it's further forward in the picture. But I will soften some areas off if they look too harsh, and use the eraser as well to add a few highlights. But as you can see, those sun rays are getting almost lost now, but they're still just there, just very subtly, just in the background. Yeah, so you'll have to let me know in the comments section if you prefer the picture with the boat in it, or afterwards when I decided to add the two backpackers and erase the boat. I suppose everybody's taste is going to differ, but yeah, it'd be interesting to know. Just using the kneadable eraser now, just to just pull a few highlights, just sort of in the middle distance. I don't want to add too much detail there, but I don't want it to. Certainly don't want it to clash with the foreground tree, but I don't want it to get lost completely in the background. So just a little bit of subtle detail, like those highlights, can just bring it just a little bit forward and just add a little bit more interest. Of course, you know, blending and softening all the time. As you can see, I'm actually using the paper blending stump there to actually draw with. Get some nice soft marks in the foreground grass. And going in with the HB pencil and just defining it just a little bit more. And softening off again. It's all part of my technique really. It's more or less a three-part technique which I use for all my drawings, and it's basically just put some graphite down, blend it in, and then erase some highlights, and that's it. I mean, you know, just doing those three things and you can create these lovely effects with graphite. I'm using a 2H pencil now, just sort of going in and out of the foliage there, just to try and create the illusion of a few more tree trunks, just slightly more forward than the distant forest, but not quite as far forward as the foliage there in the middle distance. It's just helping to link the background to the middle ground just a little bit. I'm using the Tombow Mono eraser there. That's a very fine tipped eraser. I think it's 2.3mm tip on it, very fine. And I use that just for little tiny highlights and fine detail, just here and there. And now I'm using the 2H pencil just to shade in around the back of the highlights, just so the highlights stand out just a little bit more. Because obviously if you want something to look lighter, a good trick to do is to make the surrounding area darker, and the lighter areas will look a lot lighter than they were before. But in this case I don't want anything to stand out too much, because it is, you know, more in the background. So it's trying to get that balance really between all the different planes in the drawing, you know, foregrounds and backgrounds and middle distance and all that kind of stuff. You know, once you've mastered that, excuse me, you know, you really start to get some nice results. I mean, it's all to do with aerial perspective. you know, and that's achieved by using these techniques like softening backgrounds off and you know, making foregrounds darker and sharper, and things like that. So, you know, I mean, I've had a lot of comments from beginners and that saying that they've tried this graphite technique. They were at a bit of a loose edge with the drawing, and they thought they'd give this, you know, they saw my video and they thought they'd give this a try, and they've been getting some good results. So it's really pleased to you know, hear your comments, and some of you have even sent me some of your drawings, you know, on Facebook and things like that. You're doing some fantastic work, and it's really good to see that you're getting to grips with this graphite powder method, because it's a great place to start for beginners and intermediates and professionals as well. It's just a lovely method to use all round, really. You know, there's just a few simple things to follow. Like I say, just keep the distances in the background nice and soft, and keep it nice and sharp in the foreground. You know, just to start with, and then you'll soon, you know, develop the other sort of the other areas, you know, the subtle areas in the mid distance and things like that. As you can see, I've started to work on the boat now and the figure, and this is where it kind of goes wrong. It doesn't look too bad, but for some reason, I just didn't like it. I think it, you know, it blocked the eye from going over to the path too much. It seemed more of an obstacle than a feature, so that's why I decided to erase it. So you can skip this bit if you want, because it's not going to be seen in the final picture. And I'm at the stage now where I'm just kind of faffing around, just, you know, trying to refine it and add a little bit more detail here and there, and just touch up some of the reflections, and you know, try and improve that figure on the boat. It's just sort of at the polishing stages now. So I think the only time I used a 2B pencil there was just to get some of the darker areas under that boat. Now I'm using the HB pencil just to put in the reflections of the tree. Once I'd erased the boat, one of the ideas I had was to do a really detailed foreground water, you know, lots of nice dark reflections and things like that, but I decided just to keep it simple, so that the eye travelled across it, because I thought, you know, like I say, putting that boat there I thought was just too much detail in that area, so I decided just to leave the water fairly simple after I'd erased the boat. So that's the final drawing with the boat, and the next frame you'll see is the finished drawing once I'd added 2 backpackers and erased the boat. So just let me know what you think. So there you go. Hope that was helpful to you. Thanks very much for viewing, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.